What if the keys to fighting floods, restoring ecosystems, and building climate resilience lies not just in science, but in storytelling, empathy, and the power of trees? And what if the person leading this charge once struggled to believe he had a future at all? Hey, everybody. I'm Stephen Shower, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, where we explore the incredible journeys of people who are transforming our world through hope, determination, and sustainability. Today's guest, Dr. Thomas Murphy, is living proof that the path to purpose isn't always linear. In this episode, Tom opens up about his winding personal and academic journey, from mental health challenges and academic setbacks to discovering healing in nature, the joy of volunteering, and a late blooming love for environmental science. He'll take us deep into the heart of the UK's Atlantic oak woodlands, also known as temperate rainforests, and share how woodland restoration isn't just about ecology, it's about people, community, and resilience. We'll hear how GIS technology and green infrastructure are changing the game for restoration work, and how engaging local communities can not only help mitigate flood risks and fight climate change, but also restore hope. And through it all, Tom reminds us of the vital role storytelling plays in science and in building a more connected, empathetic world. Dr. Thomas Murphy is an environmental scientist who specializes in nature-based solutions. His work integrates field studies, trials, and spatial modeling to better understand woodland restoration and ecosystem resilience, particularly in the UK's native temperate rainforests. With over a decade of restoration experience, Tom is the lead author of the State of Southwest England's Temperate Rainforests. He's hosted the UK's first rainforest conference and currently supervises 2 PhD students in the field. He lectures in environmental sciences at the University of Plymouth, where he also teaches across sustainability and environmental management programs. And coming up real soon in June 2025, he'll host an international webinar on temperate rainforests. So if you've ever wondered how planting trees, telling stories, and embracing second chances can shape the future of our planet, this is the episode for you. So let's dive into this inspiring conversation with Dr. Thomas Murphy here on Stories Sustain Us, where we're inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Well, hello, Dr. Murphy. How are you? Tom, good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, Stephen. Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me on Stories Sustain Us. I've been eagerly awaiting this opportunity to chat with you since, I don't know, reached out to a month or 6 weeks ago to kind of see if you'd come on the show. So thank you for taking time to join me and tell me your story and some of the great things you're working on over in the UK. I'm in Seattle. It's a nice sunny morning actually here in Seattle, which is, we need the rain, but I'll take the sun when I can get it. So you are where? Let's tell everybody where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm in in a little village just outside of a town or a city called Plymouth, which is down in the southwest of England. And yeah, so it's a very small little village, about 30 minutes outside of Plymouth. So it's in the wet zone so a bit like Seattle in that sense, very much in the wet zone of the UK. So we're in the temperate rainforest zone.
Nice.
So yeah.
All right. Well, I know you. Part of why we're here is to talk about that and all your work with the rainforest and restoration work that you're doing in the woodlands of the UK. But before we get into that, let's jump into your life. Tom, tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up in this area, or what's your journey to getting to this little village outside of Plymouth?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Stephen. Yeah, my journey, because it's not often in life you get the chance to look back, actually. We're always constantly looking forward.
Sure.
So it was actually really, really nice to be able to do that. So it's, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to do that and the invitation to come on today. It's really nice to do that. So yeah, my journey is, definitely a winding path, shall we say.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not from this little town, a little village called Birrelstone in Devon. That's where I've sort of made my home. So I grew up in a part of England called East Anglia, very flat area. My parents had moved there from their hometown in Bristol,
Yeah.
in the west of England. So my dad had moved as a young technician with a pregnant wife to East Anglia. So I grew up in a town called Stowmarket, which was very, quite an industrial, rural town. Not that much going on. Few small group of friends. My parents didn't know anybody, so it was quite a close knit sort of family group.
Yeah.
And yeah, loved. Well, I think one of my parents was sort of thinking about, okay, well, how am I where I am today? I think one of the standout things that I always remember is really enjoying walking. So my parents talk about, like, so it's to give you a picture of
Yeah,
what East
please.
Anglia is like. It's a rural area, so it's sort of countryside, and there's a small little stream, sort of very. It's a place where Constable basically did lots of quite famous paintings, sort of describing a rural idyll of England,
Yeah.
centuries past. So I spent a lot of time walking along rivers, and enjoying nature. So I went to a school in the nearest sort of town. So there's a place called Ipswich,
Yeah.
which is you might know that from football, actually.
I
So that's
do.
probably one of the famous things
Yeah.
about Ipswich.
Yeah.
Ipswich is the football team, which were
Yep.
quite
Yeah.
successful. Successful again, hopefully.
Yeah.
And
They're in the
maybe.
Premier League. I don't know they're going to stay up, but they're.
No, I don't know how long that's going to last for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but so I went to school in that town. So my parents are Catholics. We went to a Catholic school, which
Okay.
was a really. So we went to a really interesting school, actually. So it was a Catholic, but it was a comprehensive. So
Hmm.
we had kids from different backgrounds. So we had Italian kids with Polish background. We had kids with so my parents' background is quite a bit of Irish family.
Okay.
So it was quite multicultural,
Yeah. Nice.
and it was a really nice school, but we had kids from local council estates as well. So it was a good social grounding, I think, and it sort of prepared me for speaking to, and basically supported my love of actually speaking to lots of different people, and that's something I get to do in my job, actually, which is really,
Yeah.
really nice. So that's just the place I went to school and grew up. Maybe I could talk to you about some of what. Well, I wasn't that successful at school, so I
I
was.
was going to ask you about your academic. You kind of talked about getting this early love of nature from walking along the rivers and being outside and everything. Academically, were you drawn towards that profession early on, or not? Because you just hinted at you weren't necessarily the highest achieving student. So what
No.
what was your academic journey like?
Yeah, I wasn't really. I didn't think I was academic, which is interesting. So I would enjoy school for seeing my mates, so socializing,
Yeah.
and playing football.
Yeah.
So I love to play football. So that was,
Yeah.
I
Grew up doing the
sort
same
of,
thing.
that was really how I saw school. So a lot of what
Yep. Me too.
went in one ear and then came out the other, really, to be honest. So, but I did always enjoy art. So
Okay.
I had a real passion for drawing, and those sort of being outside really sort of inspired me to be creative. So I used to have quite bad problems when I was young with anxiety and stress, and I found it really therapeutic. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
ended up,
Nice.
that was the thing I really enjoyed. So I remember doing my GCSEs and excelling in art. I did okay at the other subjects, given the amount of effort I put into them, which wasn't particularly much. But I really, really enjoyed, the art, and also geography. So I enjoyed a
Okay.
subject where I could learn about nature a bit more.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, do too much revision. But I did my did my GCSEs, which is sort of high school. Then when I went to do my A levels, and I chose a very quite a mix of subjects. So I chose biology because I loved, I was interested in the natural world. But I chose geography, I chose maths. Sorry, not maths. I chose physics, and I chose art. So it's quite a
That is a
mix of
wide
subjects
range.
there.
Yeah.
And it probably reflected that I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Sure.
I was just enjoying being a teenager, enjoying having friends and girlfriends and etc.
Yeah.
So I look back at that time with real fondness.
Nice.
And then didn't I probably should have put a bit more work into my A-level results, and then I ended up falling into I ended up going to art school. So I did a foundation degree in art at a local college, so the Suffolk College. After, well, I sort of look back and think maybe it was the decision I made at the time,
Yeah.
But I sort of halfway through that, I had some really, I ended up splitting. So I really enjoyed it. I went to, part of it, I did a project on trees. So I did
It's an art project.
An art project, yeah. It was all
Okay.
about trees, and it was about the negative space between trees. So we've got these really nice big oak trees in a nearby park, and ended up doing some lots of drawings and illustrations. So I thought in my head, okay, that's my path. I want to be an illustrator.
Yeah.
Anyway, halfway through that, I sort of very much I fell out of it really. I did actually I split up with a girlfriend at the time. I had my mum. She moved away, so my parents split up when I was about 10 or so. So I found that really difficult. So mentally, I sort of struggled a bit.
Happening. Of course.
Life was happening. I was being a teenager, and it was quite difficult. So
thanks for sharing that vulnerability about that, because those are real stories, right? I mean, those things happen to folks, everywhere, and those are hard situations for a young mind to kind of understand and to manage. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely something that I think when I was thinking about today, doing the reflecting, it's like, it's important for my story. Really, it sort of inspired me. So following that,
nice.
I had
thanks for sharing that.
I had quite a bad sort of period. So I fell out of the course. Ended up feeling really depressed, and I got to a really quite a bad point at one point, and it was mentally, and I was not in a good spot. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I failed basically my A level, my art degree. Didn't have a qualification. I wasn't. I was definitely feeling not good.
Things sounds like pretty heavy.
And it does happen at that age, and you don't know what to do, and you're feeling sort of what am I going to do in my life? So
had a very similar when I kind of finished with my undergraduate degree, and like, well, now what? And not having any real sense of clear direction. It was a hard time. So I can relate to some of the things that you're sharing. So
that's good. It can be really difficult at that age, and that's why with the students I now talk to, I have a lot of time for them, because I think they have a tough time. It's a tough age. Finding your confidence and finding your feet in life is difficult, and some people, it's easy, but some people, it can start off difficult. So
absolutely.
So it was certainly difficult for a while. So I dropped out, like I said, of this this art school, and then I was working at ended up, so when I was 16, I had a weekend job, basically working in a newspaper distribution centre. So I was very manual labour, working in a factory, but it was a bit of a job for a while. And yeah, life went on, and I had I suppose my life got to a bit of a crisis point, actually, and I actually got so far where I had a really bad period where I couldn't. So by this time I was early 20s, so it'd been 2 or 3 years since I dropped out of this foundation degree, this art degree, and I was pretty much on the verge of trying to jump over a cliff or actually, so it got that bad.
Got that serious,
yeah,
wow.
It got really serious. I had a real mental health
sure
crisis at one point.
Thank you again, Tom, for your honesty. I mean, that these are real things that happen to people, and these aren't things that need to be hidden or shamed or anything. These are real human experiences, and I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the story about how you eventually found a lighter path away from some of that darkness. So thank you for your honesty. That's really important. So I appreciate it.
No, thanks, Stephen. No, I was, like I said, I was deciding if I should mention those sort of things, but I think actually it's really important to be honest about these sort of things.
It is. Other people need to know that, normalize those types of hard situations, because they happen.
Yeah,
they happen. If we don't talk about them, then people feel like they're alone and isolated when they're in those circumstances. And there's so many of us have experienced hard times like that, and if we don't share openly, to whatever degree of comfort we have around sharing those personal things, but sharing it helps normalize it for somebody else listening to this or hearing it, that, oh, I'm not alone. Somebody else feels that way, and it's hard. But there are ways to move through that, and life does get better. So again, I'm really grateful for your sincerity and your willingness to share that deep part of your story. So I guess I'll stop interrupting, but continue, please.
No, yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, yeah, it's good to talk about that, and and it's part of my story. So I had this crisis, early 20s. It was a crisis point, and luckily it was a turning point as well for my life and my pathway moving forward. So it meant that I got some help, some mental health intervention. I got some medication, and it was I can always remember it was spring of 2012, and spring is a wonderful time of year, and I could feel my mind and vision clearing and becoming a bit more coherent, but also more hopeful about the future. So I was in one of the things I did as part of that recovery, I suppose, was I started volunteering at a local wildlife trust. There's a charity in the UK called the Wildlife Trusts. So I basically did some volunteering, and it was enough to take me outside into the woodlands with a small group of people doing very simple things, practical work like fencing and deer brashing, so basically protecting woodland from deer, doing very sort of simple but useful and I guess mindful tasks, you'd call it nowadays, in the woodlands. And that was a great process for me, and a process of healing. I found it was really, really nice. So I had a wonderful spring and summer of that year, and that really built my confidence. And I thought, okay, I'm in a really good spot here. What am I going to do with my life, really? I need to do something. I need to change what I'm doing. I'm not academic, but maybe I can do something. And so I started looking at courses. So I thought, okay, well, art college didn't work too well for me. So let's try the nature side. I'm really, really passionate about
Yeah.
I could see the value of being in the woodlands and work in these areas. So I said, okay, well, let's apply for something that's vaguely environmental. So I was looking at geography courses, because when I was growing up, I was always put off science. So I did science, but I always imagined it was someone in a white coat,
Sure. Yeah.
with a test tube,
Yeah.
and I didn't really see myself in that role.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
always, playing, getting mucky at school, going for walks, and I didn't see I was a scientist. So I was sort of initially put off the idea of science, and then luckily, a university, so University of Plymouth, they had a foundation science course. And they accepted me. So it had been a while since I'd done A levels. They weren't that great in the first place, but Plymouth said, "Come on down, and we'll have a look. We can do these modules on biology, statistics, maths. We'll get you to a certain level where you can then go on to the degree that you want to do." So I thought, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd been to Plymouth before. It's in a really nice part of the world where, it's got lovely sort of scenery, and it's by the coast. And I thought, I can get into surfing and
Nice.
have a good time, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I moved down to Plymouth, and which was initially scary. So moving away from my dad, but I had some family close by in Bristol. So I thought, okay. So I can really vividly remember turning up at the first lecture and being terrified, thinking, okay, I'm not academic. How's this going to go? And I can remember getting the first bits of coursework in and going, oh, okay, how am I going to do this? It's something that I really, really enjoyed the course. I got confidence from actually doing it right. It was really, I think it's probably the age where I could sort of apply myself, basically. So
sure. And I'm imagining some of the help that you'd received earlier in your crisis situation was also providing you some tools to continue to work through some of those self-doubts and move towards a more confident approach to life as well. So I think all those kind of steps led you to that place where you could take on these new challenges and be successful. So at least
definitely.
that's what I'm imagining of your story. I hope that's accurate. So
no, it is. That's definitely. I mean, that's sort of why. Definitely why I mentioned that period, because it gave me actual real resilience tools. I'd always been a willful person, but it actually gave me real resilience to say, I can get through a lot. You can do this, Tom. You can really sort of do what you want to do in life, and if you put hard work in. So I gained confidence from that, and I started getting better results, and started working and reading and really enjoying studying. And I was like, I'm enjoying this. And then I finished, one of the good key moments actually of that year and making me feel settled in the area was I started volunteering, because I mentioned I was spent some time with the wildlife trusts in my home county when I was sort of in that crisis point. I wanted to have something similar where I could spend some time outside and meet a nice group of people and
connect with other people. A lot of important healing parts and just connecting to a community. Right.
Exactly. So I thought, okay, new town, I'm gonna get to know some people who are not just students, and as nice as students are, but we had a great I met an organisation called More Trees. We have a volunteering fair, and there was a lovely chap there called Brian, who unfortunately, sadly, passed away this year. But he was a real big character in my life, actually. And Brian was a lovely man who was very, very good with people, and we had a lovely conversation about what More Trees, this organisation, did. And they were a volunteer organisation who collect local seeds from woodlands. They grow those seeds on in their community nursery, and then they plant them out at a range of different sites. I thought, that sounds really good. So I went out with those guys, had a fantastic time, met a really nice group of people from all different ages and walks of life. It was really great experience, and it made me feel at home, and it made me feel like I, had the sort of the resilience to keep going with my academic work. And also, one of the fantastic things I did is met my future wife volunteering as well. So one of the first days was meeting my now wife planting trees.
Nice.
Which is really special.
That's lovely. Yeah.
So I went on to do a I went on to environmental science. So there was a very charismatic lecturer called John Ball, who was he's retired in his 80s now. He only just retired recently, but a passionate person. And he said, if you want to change the world and make it a better place, then do some environmental science, take our course. So I was really taken by that passion. It really thought, okay, well, I want to be taught by someone like him. So I went down the environmental sciences path. And then I got onto my undergraduate degree. And I absolutely, my grades got even better, and I ended up doing academically really, really well. I was like, I'm in the top few marks in the year. It was fantastic, and it was just strange because I was doing a science subject. And I was good at it, and I knew how to apply myself, and I was really enjoying it. And then I suppose one of the really important moments of where I am now is there's two key ones. There's one of the good things I did is we had a trip to Malaysia that was all paid for, and that was one of the big things I thought about the course, because I didn't come from a well-off background.
Sure.
It was a lot of money, but they did have this paid-for course to the rainforests. I thought, that would be amazing, and that was inspirational. So one of the things that we did is we spent 4 or 5 days doing a research project in Southeast Asia, doing work with trees and soils and understanding. I was looking at the buttress roots of big rainforest trees, and it was brilliant. So that was really turned me on to research.
Amazing.
And field work. And the other thing was my dissertation project, which was with More Trees, the organisation who I started volunteering with. And I did my project on a site which I'd planted the year before, and I wanted to go and see how are those trees doing, and so I had a project which basically looking at how the trees were responding to the soils they were planted in, but also particularly the vegetation that they were growing in. So they were put into a sort of what was a pasture field, and I spent 6 weeks collecting data, going way over the top in terms of data collection. So I literally collected enough data for 3 dissertation projects. I was literally offloading samples and data to other people. But I knew from that day on that that summer that I wanted to do research. I found my niche. Yeah, exactly. I absolutely loved doing it. And I loved the research, and I loved the statistics, and I loved telling the story of what that data meant, and communicating it.
That's the important part, right?
Yeah,
make sure people understand it, that who aren't scientists, who aren't engrossed in the data, being able to communicate that is such a incredibly important part of the process that sometimes is missed.
It's such a critical element, making sure that and that's how we change the world, is communicating that in a compelling way. So I did really enjoying that, and one of the things that, reflecting on some of that work as thinking about, okay, well, when I was at school, I was thinking science was someone in a white lab coat and being very serious, and actually you learn that that's actually most of science is about having a passion for a subject and keeping going with it. And there's a lot of creativity in the process of understanding about your environment. So that was definitely something I learned about how I communicate in a creative way. So using the skills that I really enjoyed when I was doing art and illustration to get across a message, I was sort of using it in a using data to be able to do that in a nice way. So that was like a good learning moment, and it set me on the path for definitely my future academic career. And then, I mean, Stephen, shall I have a go on to my PhD and all the rest of that? And
give a quick synopsis of the PhD, and that'll kind of lead us up to kind of present day, and we can in a short bit transition then into some of the things that you've been doing and are doing now. So let's not miss out on that little piece of the story. But if you can kind of surmise how you got from this summer of rainforest work and research work and just finding your passion for storytelling around data collection, and now how did you get to your PhD and the work that you're doing now?
So after that dissertation I mentioned, I basically started doing a master's project, and I was financing that through, I was working actually cleaning toilets. So I've got a claim to fame that half of my PhD was funded, or quarter probably, cleaning toilets at a local shopping centre. And so my PhD, or my research master's at the time, was looking at basically oak woodland. And so we have Atlantic oak woodland all up the west coast of the UK. This project was going to look at how we can support the establishment of this woodland. So we've just got fragments of this really important habitat type left in the UK, and globally. It's deemed a temperate rainforest, so it's a globally rare biome, less than 1% of the planet. So this project was really looking at how we can support the restoration of this habitat, and particularly looking at the really early life stages of oak in particular. So we've got so I was looking at I absolutely loved that project. Again, it was more field work. And then halfway through that project, I managed to get some funding from the Environment Agency to look at how those seedlings and those saplings were changing their environment and mitigating flood risk and changing soil properties. So I had a wonderful time looking at understanding how quickly those trees were altering their soil environment. And we did some great work looking at stakeholder engagement, and it was a wonderful 3 years overall, spending a lot of time in woodlands very early in the morning as well, which is like a real pleasure to spend time in the woodlands really early in the morning.
Sounds lovely.
It was great. It was really, really good. And the field work's great, and I really enjoyed it. And I sort of, and that was my PhD. And so looking at the very early life stages of oak. So obviously for your listeners, in the UK, we have two oak species. We have peduncular oak and sessile oak. So could give their Latin, but they're very charismatic trees. So I mean, oak or the world over are generally large trees. They're quite often long-lived. But I was looking at it when they were sort of babies and
just starting
almost, and I sort of felt a bit of commonality with them as oaks are quite tough, and they go through a bit of abuse, and they
I
have
like that.
a tough time in life, tough stuff, but they make it, and they persist.
Yeah.
And I sort of I felt a bit of a connection with
I
those oak
love that.
trees.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sort of really got into my PhD, and then I had to finish my PhD back in 2020. And I've gone on to postdoc research. So as a research fellow, on a local project in the area. It's a slightly left field project, so we started to. I was working as my formal title was industrial research fellow. So I was working with businesses to help them reduce their carbon emissions through lots of different means. So looking at green walls and how we could use plants and understanding between soils and trees and vegetation in a different way to basically reduce carbon emissions with local businesses. So really loved that work, and throughout my PhD I'd been teaching. So I went on some work experience. I'll bring this up because I went on some work experience when I was 14. So had a week at an architect's office and a week in working as a wildlife ranger. And I remember really distinctively teaching a class of probably 10-year-olds when I was 14, so a few years younger than me, and I thought I was definitely an adult and they were definitely children. But looking back, it's definitely not the case.
Sure.
I remember coming out of that and teaching them how to make a bird box, and I can remember the rush of endorphins after I did that. It was the most wonderful thing. And I remember getting that feeling again as demonstrating at the university whilst I was a PhD student, but then also when I was a postdoc supervising undergraduate students with their projects, which were looking at woodland restoration. It was great. It was a really great experience. And,
Well, I can hear the passion in your voice for teaching, and I'm sure that comes through to your students. And you shared earlier how you have empathy for your students, particularly those who may be going through a tough time that very well yourself. So it sounds like all the pieces of the puzzle, while they may have looked messy all over the table 10, 15 years ago, it sounds like they've started to all fill in and make a really beautiful life that you're living now. So I'm thrilled for you and appreciate you sharing that journey. And I can connect on a few things on my own journey as well. I started out after high school and in my undergraduate as a chemistry major, thinking I was going to go on to med school for some reason. That just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But I did spend a fair amount of time in labs, in white coats, in sterile environments, and was like, this is not what I want to do at all. And when an environmental science degree opened up at the university where I was at, it was Dr. McLean was a inspirational professor for me that kind of encouraged me. He was the leader of this new environmental science program. So, where you had your, the adults in your life, the professors in your life that kind of triggered some new ways of thinking and some change of direction for you. I was like, and I had a similar message that you received about if you really want to change the world, environmental science is where you're going to want to get into. So that's led us to this conversation this many, 30 plus years later. That was a while ago.
It's amazing how quick life goes, doesn't it? And you look back at it and think, wow.
Yeah, it is. It was, I graduated with my environmental science degree 31 years ago. So it does not seem like that should be the case, but I think that's how the numbers add up.
Yeah.
So,
great.
Well, before we get on to some of the work that you're doing now, I have one other really important question. Who's your team? You mentioned football earlier. You grew up playing it. You mentioned Ipswich. Who's your club?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am an Ipswich. Well, I'm a tractor boy, so I grew up in Ipswich, my hometown. So yeah, my football team in the UK is definitely Ipswich Town. So yeah, that's So when I can try and get to a game and watch them. They're a club with like real history. Being the from a small town, they've had lots of success over the years, and had some tough times recently, but they're moving on up. So it's been difficult following them, definitely, because they're not. It would be an easy life if I followed Manchester City or Liverpool. But
Mostly
they're
easy.
my team. How about you, Stephen? Have you got a football team?
I love the sport. I grew up playing it, and at this point, I don't know that I'm a diehard for any, because I didn't grow up having access to watching the top clubs. I mean, in the States, growing up in the 80s, I mean, soccer was, here soccer.
Yeah.
It was still such a new thing, and so being able to watch, top European clubs play, that just wasn't a thing until later in life. So, by the time the 90s and early 2000s, when we could have access to watching it on a regular basis, it was, the era of Man United, crushing everybody and doing so well. And they were always the ones to see, Man United or Liverpool. So, so I just am at this point in my life, I just want to see good games. I just want to see the beauty of it, the skill of it, the artistry of it. And so I just love watching the games, and I don't cry when this club loses or celebrate when that team wins. I just enjoy watching the sport at this point, which is probably not the right answer for someone who's a diehard fan of their club. But that's kind of the way it is. I just love the sport, and Champions League games are going on right now, and I got that on while I'm at work, so I can watch during the day. So the big clubs over there are all so fun to watch. But what I tell people over here too, sorry, we're turning this into a football interview, but people over here don't really understand how the leagues over there work, and that even if you're at the bottom, like, you're fighting to stay up, you're fighting to not get relegated, and that makes every game count, every game. So because everybody's fighting to win, whether they're trying to win the league or just not get relegated to the lower league. And that's something that the sports over here, people don't understand. If a team does a bad season, they're still going to be in the top pro league next year. Who cares? And that's just it's a different atmosphere over there, and I love the way you guys do it over there. So
it's definitely, that league system is really quite special in that sense, because it means everything to people, because it's
every game matters, every point
case
matters.
it can be the case of someone losing their jobs. So these teams are quite often like the center of the community. In history, they were the foundation of lots of community action, and it's definitely I think that's a very healthy approach in terms of not getting too invested. I've been trying to take that approach, and I'm a fan of Ipswich, but I'm definitely not a die-hard fan. I don't go to enough away games and stuff, but I think that's a nice way of looking at sport, really, of enjoying the good bits.
Well, thanks for the little detour there. I just, whenever I'm speaking with someone from the UK, I always kind of have to throw that question in there, who they support, or if and occasionally some people don't even support anybody. It's not their thing. So, well, tell me, Tom. Let's get back into the why we're here, because I could talk about football the rest of the day with you. But let's also talk about something I can talk with you all day about. Is the work that you're doing with the woodland restoration work and how it ties into stormwater management, and you mentioned carbon issues. So what's some of the work that you're doing now, and tell us about that.
So at the moment, I work as a lecturer in environmental sciences at the university the degree I came through, which is a really great thing to do. My work involves a lot of both teaching and research. So in terms of research, you mentioned the stormwater sort of management. We've got quite a few projects and research projects that have are looking at how we might use trees in different ways to mitigate flood risk. So one of the things that a lot of my research looks at is how we can obviously restore woodland, but we can do it in places where actually it's quite difficult to achieve. So for those of you who are not familiar with the UK and particularly the north and western areas of the UK that I mentioned, these temperate rainforest zones, they're generally the hillier areas. So they've got mountains and hills, but they've got a long history of not having many trees because those trees were cleared a long time ago.
Sure.
And there's real challenges in those areas with climate change. So we have lots more rainfall with climate change, particularly in winter. So we have lots of extreme weather events where more and more flooding is becoming a big issue. But we also have dry periods in the summer. So, I mean, like the world over, our precipitation and rainfall is getting more uncertain, lots more extreme events.
More heavy rain events followed by longer periods of drought.
Exactly.
Kind of the story of the world over.
So I mean, just this spring, we haven't had, until a few days ago, we had no rain almost for 2 months, which almost 2 months, like a terrible amount or a very tiny amount of rainfall. It's really, we're talking millimeters when we're in the wet area of the UK and we should be receiving rainfall.
Getting a lot more.
So it's really noticeable. Really noticeable. So that's causing lots of issues with flooding.
So when it does rain, what I imagine the flooding issue, then you described a hilly terrain that trees have been removed, decades ago, if not centuries ago. So what I'm imagining happening then in this area is that rain falls in this, and it just rushes then down the hillside, down to the lower parts, down. And is that the kind of the flooding issue? Is that what's happening, or am I not getting that right in my imagination?
No, that's perfectly right. You're getting a lot more water basically ending up in downstream in villages and towns. So a lot more flooding happening. So it's just going straight off those hillsides. There's nothing to hold it back. And these areas are where historically we would have had. I mentioned temperate rainforest, but we would have had these forests that would have been dripping in lichens and mosses. And these are beautiful habitats. I know up where you are in the Northwest Pacific, you've got these beautiful temperate rainforest habitats with lots of epiphytes, and it's a wet environment, but they're beautiful and they're needed functionally to intercept that rainfall.
Absorb all that rainfall, right?
So that's one of the challenges that a lot of my research focuses on is how we can restore these environments across the northwest Europe, which is so just to give you an idea, we have around 13 or 14% woodland cover. So the average for Europe is around over 30% woodland cover across those areas. So we lost a lot. And so we're looking at how we can intervene in particular areas. So can we use tree planting, but how can we support natural regeneration to basically decompact some of those soils, and how can we support regeneration of trees in an environment where, so you can imagine these upland areas, not very many trees, lots of rainfall, but very good at growing grass and animals and livelihoods for people. So one of the challenges is how you start to change that landscape and make it more functionally coherent and better for nature, but whilst also making sure that people don't feel disenfranchised and
economies
that
aren't lost, and
that we can still maintain a food system that local food systems and maintaining a local supply of food and making sure people don't still feel a connection to that landscape. So a lot of my work, there's one was quite an interesting project I can tell you about, which was basically, so I sort of across the discipline from my environmental science, so looking at tree soil interactions, working with a social scientist and an illustrator. So I got the opportunity to get back into doing some art. So we ran a workshop which was working with there's some local communities who there's a term for these people called commoners. So they're people who have the right to graze their animals in these landscapes. So really tied with grazing, and we ran a project which basically tried to get their perspectives of this landscape and where they could support trees and how they thought that could happen. So it was really tense. So it's a really big issue at the moment about how we restore these ecosystems. There's lots of talk about rewilding and restore nature recovery, which I'm all for. But there's politically, it's quite it's difficult. And I remember going into these workshops and it was tense atmosphere. People had a lot at stake, but we developed a method where instead of recording what people said, so people could be honest and open, the illustrator drew it. So we had a drawing way of recording it, and it worked brilliantly as a methodology. And one of the great things we had come out of that meeting was an agreement to plant trees in certain areas if we could be a bit more intense, if those grazers could be basically ramp up their grazing for animals in some areas. So we actually got some really good progress out of that. And one of the things
the trade-off.
Yeah, a bit of a trade-off, really. And one of the things we came up with, so working with the Environment Agency here in the UK and the university and an organisation which represented the commoners, was to come up with some plots where we would actually test very small areas. So they're sort of literally 10 by 15 meters wide. And we would test in those small plots. So we said, okay, well, can you give up some of the grazing land? We'll fence off that area. We're going to put some sensors in to understand how the densities of trees we put in influences the speed at which those soils can recover and might help mitigate flood risk. And they signed up to it, and they were part of helping that being implemented. And that's a really exciting long-term project, which we're going to get sensors in the ground literally this month, I'm hoping, or maybe next month. So sensors in the ground to monitor both how those trees are changing the soil properties in those areas, but also how those trees are developing and how those trees are starting to modify their climate.
Their
so we're going to have lots of survey work with some microclimate sensors in those environments. So I mentioned those temperate rainforest systems. One of the threats from those temperate rainforests is in the summer them drying. So we're going to do some testing to look at, okay, well, how do these interventions and distance to the river and density of trees relate to both changes in microclimate, but also changes in the biology of what we see. So those epiphytes, how much biodiversity are we going to see recruited into those areas? And also, how much might those epiphytes, which look obviously wonderful and have how might they functionally help support and mitigate those more extreme precipitation and rainfall events, because they hold a lot of water. So that's just some of the projects. One of the projects we got, one of the things I've been doing is one of the great things I'm able to be involved with was a group of organisations in or across the UK in the temperate rainforest zone have started to get together to recognise they have these temperate rainforests. So temperate rainforests, believe it or not, in the UK is actually quite a recently popularised term for our what we would call Atlantic oak woodland or Atlantic forests. But it's amazing how these are temperate rainforest sites. The change of terminology really changes the way
Language
people
matters.
look. It matters.
Yeah.
It matters massively. So now the public now recognise these as temperate rainforests. There's this groundswell of opinion amongst large sections of the public. So there was a few recent books that have been bestsellers, so Times bestsellers in the UK, and that have really popularised that we have these temperate rainforests. There's an author called Guy Shrubsole who I recommend reading a book called The Lost Rainforests of Britain if you want a snapshot of
Nice.
These habitats and how they're developing and how beautiful are. So there's this really movement behind temperate rainforest restoration. So lots of organisations have now started to band together to say, we have this really degraded now and fragmented habitat on our doorstep. So very small amounts of it left. We have quite a big area of our country. So I reckon around 20% of the UK actually falls within the temperate rainforest zone. They're important areas for flood mitigation. They're really, really key areas for biodiversity. They're going to hopefully help us, like I said, mitigate those more extreme rainfall events. And so I mentioned these organisations are getting together. One of the things that I've been involved in is some research with a local alliance called the Southwest Rainforest Alliance, which is a group of organisations in the region, and they want to produce, and I've been working on something called the State of Report. So it's the first, it's like an audit basically of temperate rainforests. So I've been working on that last year, and we've done some literature review with that. We've also done some modelling and mapping. So one of the things I do in my research is I like to do some trials looking at so field work, but also I've now started to use like modelling and mapping approaches, so GIS approaches to understand, okay, well, if we're going to restore this habitat, where are we going to restore it? So one of the things that this model does is say, okay, well, our climate's changing, and we may have these very warm, wet conditions now, which are needed for temperate rainforests. There's warm, wet conditions, but how is that has that climate changed in the future? And also, where should we be focusing our efforts? So you can imagine with lots of thankfully, lots of new woodland happening. Actually, we should really be focusing our efforts, our energies towards the areas that are going to get the maximum benefit. So this model that we've developed is basically combines topographic features. So it looks at slope angle, slope aspect. It looks at wind speed and something called the hygrothermia index, which is a precipitation and temperature index, which calculates the oceanicity essentially of that climate. And we combine that with records of those rare species I was talking about. So we have some lichens which are found nowhere else in the world, which for the UK perspective, given we're quite a small island which was recently glaciated, is quite a unique thing. So we've got these really important globally rare lichens and bryophytes. So it combines a range of factors to say, okay, well, where should we be focusing our efforts for planting, but also for restoring? And that is really such an exciting piece of work. I get really excited by this because it's really practical research. So it's already being used, that model, to direct woodland restoration across the southwest of England. And we've just got some great news that we've got some funding in to do it nationally. So we're going to be basically directing the temperate rainforests and modelling where they should happen with practitioners across the UK, which is really exciting. So,
that's a big deal. Congratulations. That's So, just for the audience who may not be familiar with some of the technical terms, you mentioned GIS, that acronym, and geographical information systems, and just to simplify some of the things that I think you're saying for the non-technical audience. Basically, you're using digital map technology, this GIS technology that can have different layers of information, and you describe some of the information that you're using, historical records and modeling. So that then all goes into these models that you can then make future predictions about what happens if we plant here, or I'm wondering if you're also doing hydrology and hydraulics to see how it might be impacting stormwater runoff, or how many different multi benefits are you looking at, or are you just looking at kind of the best impact for where to grow and restore the temperate rainforest? Or are you looking at other aspects in these models that you're creating?
Sorry, I realized I got excited and got a bit too technical there.
It's very good. I think I was following most of it, but I want to make sure the people who might not have the technical background are appreciating what you're doing as well, because it's deeply fascinating work and very important work. But I want to make that connection for a non-technical audience so that they can kind of understand, that's what he just meant. So
sure. No, we're essentially taking lots of those variables I mentioned and trying to make a map basically of where we think the priorities are for planting. So which areas are going to see the biggest benefits for like you say, the hydrology. So that's, I think, one of the interesting things about the work that we're doing is you've got the biology crossover with flood mitigation. So we want to really focus those areas where we might see the biggest planting efforts and restoration efforts in areas where maybe the soils are most compacted and there's the biggest risks to flooding downstream communities. So that model is and that map, which will be a map, will be hopefully used by those organizations in the region to sort of highlight the areas where maybe planting might best support those rare species as well. So those mosses and those lichens that I mentioned, it might actually help understand how the areas where those species can move quickest, and given our climate is changing massively quite quickly. And so one of the things we're going to do is actually project forwards so expecting, so what's the climate going to look like in 2080, and essentially run those different factors again, and so we can identify, okay, well, where should we be planting now that we might see the biggest benefit for future, in terms of, biggest benefit for those trees for flood mitigation and decompacting those soils, but also for creating some habitat that's going to be that's going to be sort of high quality and is going to allow those really rare species to move. So hope that does that explain a bit more clear.
It does, yeah. You're kind of really looking at focusing limited resources. None of us have enough money to do all the planting we want to do, or human capital, human power to do all the restoration that we want to do. So really using a variety of data sources, bringing them all into one predictive model, and then kind of encouraging folks with the final product, the map that's created, and based on all of this different information, encouraging people, these are the best places, and to focus your attention, your restoration efforts. And I like the way that this is also cutting across different benefits. So it's benefiting the trees, right, which is then benefiting the lichen and the habitat, which is also then providing some stormwater runoff benefit for people downstream. So looking at how all of these systems are interrelated. I think over the last few decades, if not few centuries, we've seemed to forgot along the way that all of these things are interconnected. So that you're providing, if you're putting your resources into these targeted areas, it's going to have multiple benefits. It's not just for the trees, it's not just for the lichen, it's not just for the birds or the habitat. There's the humans benefit from this work as well, from safer communities and healthier habitats that we get to enjoy, as well as the other species we share it with. So I appreciate the deep thoughtfulness that went into what you're doing to look across all of these different benefits and kind of house them in one place, which is the power of the GIS systems and the modeling and mapping that you're using. So I hope I explained all that correctly as well, that I echoed what you said appropriately. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's those co-benefits. So it's thinking, like you say, about one of the things I didn't mention was carbon, so those trees do a fantastic job at pulling all that carbon out of the atmosphere, and are helping us tackle, the CO2 problem that we have.
Another benefit, right?
Just thinking about, where we can best target our efforts. So it's hopefully, it's sort of directing our hopes and our actions towards priority areas, I guess.
Where you get the biggest benefits. So well, perfect.
Yep.
Well, Tom, thank you for your time. I want to be respectful of your afternoon there as well. So it seems like we're at a good transition point here to talking about directing action and benefits to get to the maximum outcome for all of these different intertwined things that we all share within our ecosystems and our environments and the communities that we live in. Now seems like it'd be a good time to do a call to action. Then what do you want people who've just heard your story and learned about the great work you're doing over there in the UK? What do you want them to do? How can they support your work, or how can they get involved in their own communities and take your lessons learned and apply them to their lives? So what do you want people to do? Focus that energy so we can continue to make benefits in the future.
I think definitely I would encourage everybody to, if they haven't planted a tree at some point in their life, I mentioned that's something that I met my wife doing, and it's something that I think is very, very valuable to do. It's looking forward. There's the saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So I really passionately believe that reaching out to your local community to see what's going on in terms of particularly the native woodland, there's often so whether it's, I'd encourage folk to have a look at what's going on in the UK around temperate rainforests. So there's organisations like Woodland Trust, More Trees. But for folks in different places, there's normally something on your doorstep where you can plant a tree, and you can make a difference to your environment, and you can do it in a way where it's a great thing to do, so you get a sense of community. I mentioned how I've got a lot of value from joining this organisation, More Trees, and I got a new family, if you like.
Yeah.
Me and
A
my
lot of
wife.
multi-benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Me and my wife got married a couple of years ago, and we had a tree-themed wedding, and we had all of or many of the people we met at that organisation at that wedding, and it was really special. So yeah, I'd encourage people to have a look around their landscape and get involved with an organisations near them if they want to, particularly around some of the work I do. I'd be very keen for you to visit my, I've got LinkedIn profiles, I've got a personal website, so you're interested in finding out more about the work and the science that I do. If you think, okay, that sounds that sounds an interesting project, I'd be really keen to work with you. Or if you're in a temperate rainforest in a different part of the world and want to connect, then yeah, reach out over social media. I've got an email address. I'm sure Stephen can share some of my details. So please reach out, and no, I would say no idea is a bad idea as well, in terms of I've just been contacted, quite interestingly, by an organisation who want to make some music out of the data that
Oh, wow.
we're going to be getting from some of those plots. So
Yeah.
it's encourage you, if you've got an interesting idea, whether you're a musician or something else, or you work in a totally different area and you're not a woodland restoration scientist like I am, then get in contact. So
fantastic.
Yeah, that's and also before we sort of, I guess, bring it to a close, I maintain the hope, because I look back at my own journey, and it started off there was rocky times, but actually if you keep the hope, you normally end up getting, and you work hard, you normally end up getting seeing the results. And so I think that's I think about our environment and our climate crisis that we have. I think that's always something to reflect on. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's a great transition we end every episode talking about hope. So your call to action to keep and maintain the hope is a perfect way to kind of get to me to ask you about your hopes. As you just so eloquently put, hope is important. It's not a pink cloud fluffy emotion. It's actually a mindset. It's having a vision for a better future, having an idea of how to get to that better future. May not have the full plan mapped out yet, but you have an idea that there's a way to get to that better future, and there's a sense of agency that you can do something to get to that better future. And since we do talk about hard things on the show, we some of the emotional and mental health issues that you shared earlier, and climate anxiety, the climate challenges that you're facing, you just mentioned as well. Life can be hard, life can be difficult, so hope is a really important mental mindset and tool to have. So Tom, I want to ask you 3 questions about hope, and I would ask that you don't think too long about the answer. Okay. Just kind of go with whatever you first feel like is the best answer. So the first question about hope, Tom, is what is your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally or professionally or for the world, but what's your vision for a better future?
I think my vision is for a better future is people feel like they can change their environment. And so the vision is probably, I mentioned about being able to create a sense of community and enjoyment around creating and restoring our habitats, and actually being an active part of a community which helps tackle some of those problems. So yeah, I think that for me is, I would love to see is actually enjoyment of people gaining real value from their lives by restoring the habitats around them. So you get the marriage between the life we all want to lead, but also we're actually doing something positive for the planet around us. So,
yeah. So tell me why that's important. Why is that your vision? Why is it important that people get involved in their community and get involved in restoration efforts?
I think it's important because, well, fundamentally, it's important because we do have a lot of stuff to deal with in terms of our environment. In terms of specifically the vision, I think we, as you sort of touched on earlier, there is a lot of all of us feeling quite powerless in our lives. It's very easy to feel powerless with 24-hour news on. There's a barrage of bad news out there. We often feel very removed from us taking an active role as a citizen to have an impact on that. So I think it's important because if we're all hopeless and we don't maintain that feeling that we can change our environment, then what do we have? So yeah, for me, that's one of the reasons it's important, because it would demonstrate that we can actually change our wider environment.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So the last question then, Tom, imagine the future you just shared with us, this future vision of people getting involved, getting active in their community, doing restoration work, recognizing that they have the power to change their environment for the better, for their own better well-being and for that of their community and for future generations. So that beautiful vision you just outlined, imagine that's the world we're living in now, that's happening right now. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel so happy. Makes me feel warm inside, actually. Yeah. So yeah, it would be fantastic. Yeah, it makes me feel really grateful, actually. So yeah, it makes me want to sort of do some bad dancing, or maybe yeah. And I've
No
got
bad
plenty of
dancing.
bad dancing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no bad dancing. Any
No bad
dancing's
dancing.
good dancing.
Yeah.
Well, gratitude is a superpower, so I'm glad that makes you feel that way. So I think gratitude, along with hope, are just powerful aspects of humanity. So, well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Thank you for being here and sharing your journey and your expertise in woodlands restoration and stormwater mitigation and all of the different intersects that happens. So thank you for your time. I will put on our show notes page all of your contact information, so your call to action for people to reach out to you. I hope that they do. And I will leave you with the last word. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today?
No, just, I suppose, echoing my the vision. I suppose, yeah, it's really been a real pleasure to have this conversation. It's nice to really reflect on a journey. So I'd just encourage you to get involved in active woodland restoration or ecosystem restoration. It's a great thing to do, and you might change the planet and the world around you. So keep the optimism.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, cheers, Tom. Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah,
all
cheers.
Right.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
What a great conversation with Dr. Thomas Murphy. Today, we explored Tom's powerful personal journey, from grappling with mental health challenges and academic setbacks to discovering a deep sense of purpose in environmental science. He spoke about the healing power of nature, the importance of volunteering, and how community involvement and empathy are central to both teaching and ecological restoration. We also learned about his groundbreaking work restoring temperate rainforests in the UK, how woodland restoration can help mitigate flood risks and support biodiversity, and how technology like GIS can help us tell more compelling, data driven stories that lead to real change. One of the things I most appreciated about this episode was Tom's courage in sharing his story with such vulnerability. It takes real strength to open up and talk about mental health issues, especially in a field where the focus is often on data and outcomes. His willingness to open up reminds us that healing and growth often begin with connection to ourselves, to nature, and to one another. Tom also reminded us of something I think we all need to hear. Science needs storytelling. We need it not just to share information, but to change hearts and minds. And I get it. Restoration work is deeply challenging. I've seen it firsthand how difficult it can be to help people visualize what a landscape used to look like before human development reshaped it, and equally important, what it can be like after restoration. When the damage happened decades ago or even centuries ago, it can be hard for today's communities to understand what we're trying to bring back and why it matters. Good storytelling is essential to helping people understand and support sustainability. We need the science and we need the data, of course we do. But the science and data need storytelling to get people to care. Whether your perspective is focused on people, planet, or profit, seeing how sustainable choices like temperate rainforest restoration will benefit you and what you care about is what drives real action. That's where storytelling becomes an essential tool, whether through personal narratives, illustrations, or technologies like GIS. These approaches help us create a shared vision, one that is clear, compelling, and hopeful. So I want to thank Tom for his openness, his wisdom, and his leadership in restoring England's temperate rainforests. His work is truly helping to make the world a better place, not just ecologically, but emotionally and socially as well. If Tom's story inspired you, I hope you'll consider taking action in your own community, whether it's planting a tree, volunteering on a local restoration project, supporting mental health initiatives, or simply learning more about your local ecosystem. Every step matters. Your involvement can help restore not just landscapes, but community connections and a sense of shared purpose. And as always, please like and share this episode if you enjoyed it. Your support really does matter. So you sharing it with friends and family is a big deal to me. So thank you for that. And drop me a comment. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky. I'd love to hear from you. So I really do appreciate your support. The show is growing, and it's because of you, the audience. So thank you very much for all that you do to support me. And be sure to join me next week for the next episode, which will be released on May 20th, when I'll be talking with another incredible professor. She teaches in the environmental design program and brings over 25 years of experience in sustainable planning, affordable housing policy, and urban resilience. Her research uses geospatial modeling to close policy gaps and protect vulnerable heritage sites. She's taught around the world, from Florida to Texas to Egypt and Germany, and now she brings her insight and heart to communities in Colorado. You're not going to want to miss this next episode. You can catch it on May 20th on storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Please keep showing up, keep doing what you do to make the world a better place, and keep believing in restoration of the land, of the spirit, and of our shared future. Till next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Take care of yourself and each other. Take care.